Okay, so good evening, class, and welcome along to our Greek Bible studies as part of our work for Module 8. And we'll just work through these concepts about the aorist tense today. We have the aspect, which is sort of an introduction, talking about how people look at, or how the verbs are looked at and how they have aspect, which sort of explains the point of view from the point of view of the person looking at the action that's happening or explaining the action. And then we'll do a quick review of the verses from Mark 1:15 and 17, and then we'll go on to Mark 1:18 to 22, just reading through the Greek and explaining some concepts there. Your test for Module 8 will be these verses, but as I was reading through Mark and reviewing back in the earlier verses as well, I think as part of maybe the testing process that we can go back and do previous verses as well, which would, we say, keep you on your toes, meaning that you have to be alert and keep reviewing. So all of the Greek stuff that we've been doing, like from Mark chapter 1, and we were looking at even John chapter 1 and other verses, you go back through your notes and review those, and always keep looking ahead as well. So you all have Bible software now, I guess, so you could be looking at Mark chapter 1 right through the last verse in chapter 1, and then even going beyond that if you want. So. Okay, anyway, so it's a Bible class of sorts, so we'll take the time to name our sins to God the Father, as is our SOP. Okay, your screen is our score. I've got to read this fully. Your screen is our score.
Need a spreadsheet, Pastor.
Sorry, that was supposed to be secret information. Okay. Hang on, because I was showing that with Pastor, or did I show it to Pastor video? I don't know if I did actually. Okay. Screens. Wow, that's a big mistake. Okay, and it's all on record as well. That's okay. Okay. Okay, so let's just take the time to name our sins to God the Father according to 1 John 1:9. So Father in heaven, we give thanks to you that we have this time to be able to study Bible studies, Bible doctrine through the viewpoint of the original language of the Greek in the New Testament. We pray for concentration as we focus on this difficult subject, and that we can understand more about what's actually in your word as we go deeper into our understanding through the means of the original language. So we give thanks in Christ's name. Amen. Okay. So I'll go through the vocabulary again. When you're looking at a language, usually if you're learning a new language, there's usually about like sort of three main facets that you look at. And one is you need the vocabulary, one is the grammar, and then the other is the listening and the speaking skills, or we call comprehension. Though really with the Greek, we don't need to focus so much on the listening and the speaking, of course, because it's all read. Except that we do read through it because this helps with the inculcation, of course. Okay, so but again, when we're learning what we call a dead language, dead meaning that it's no longer sort of actively spoken, except maybe at some very scholarly levels, people could, maybe in the halls of these great seminaries, that the faculty, if they understand Greek very, very well, they might speak Greek to each other. But generally, we just need to focus on the vocabulary, we focus on the grammar, and then as you're reading that, you bring those two together. But anyway, so we'll keep reviewing the vocabulary, and the list today, this is from the New Testament Greek for Beginners. So we have, and remember that when we have these presented here, we've got the present tense, we've got the future, and then we have the aorist. That's those three that are being presented here as verbs. So whenever there's a verb, they'll present those three tenses, though there are other tenses, of course. You have like the pluperfect, and you have the perfect tense as well. But and what's the other one? The imperfect is one of the other major ones. But here, again, we have the present, and it's always presented as the present active indicative, the future active indicative, and the aorist active indicative here. So this is apaluo, which means I release. Ekeruxa, I preached. This must be the aorist if they put it like that. Or I proclaimed, which is the aorist of keruso. Epistrepho, and then you have epistrepso. This is a c here, so that's a ps sound. So epistrepso is the future, and then you have the epistrepha. Okay, so that means I turn or I return, and you should recognize by now that you have the epi there as the prefix, which is actually that's like a preposition to mean on top of or above, and then strepso. Also, I guess just strepho here means to turn, which they would do that. I turn and I return, and then again, if you look at the end here, you got hupo strepho. So the prefix changes from an epi to a hupo, though they translate it as the same. And there may be slight nuances. Why do in one case they use epi, which sort of means on top of, and then hupo usually means under actually. So there must be some kind of a reason for that, but it's not obvious here anyway. Etoimadzo, that's with the zeta, so we pronounce it like with a z sound. Etoimadzo, etoimaso, and then etoimasa, I prepare. A day is the adverb, which means already. Remember, adverbs like to talk about the time aspect, like now, forever, whenever, things like this. These are usually considered as adverbs because they're explaining the sort of the verb. In other words, the duration of the length of time of something. Okay, thalmadzo. What's that? I wonder, or I marvel, or I wonder at. Thalmazo, thalmasa. We see this a lot, of course, when Jesus Christ was either teaching or doing his miracles, and then the crowd were amazed or stunned, I guess. So you will see that quite a lot. Therapeuo, from the word the word therapeutic in English comes from this. I heal. Patho, or peso, epesa, is I persuade. We have the word pathos, and I believe it's related to that. Pathos means like your emotions. And when you're persuading somebody, it's often you're appealing to the emotions. Now, that you should always be appealing to the intellect when you're trying to persuade somebody, which is why when you're trying to convince people to, or not convince, when you're sharing the gospel, this is us really being used by God to persuade them. The Holy Spirit has that work of convincing people. You always talk to the mentality. Some people, maybe they try to get emotional and say, when I believed in Jesus and I felt so happy and my life changed and everything like this. But really you appeal to the mentality by giving facts. Pisteo, pisteoso, and then epistusa means I believe. And then again we have hupostrepho or strepso, sorry. And then hupostrepha. Okay, strepsa. So I always say this is phi. That's the phi, and that's psi. So yeah, okay, psi. So you have the ps sound. Hupostrepso and hupostrepsa. I return. Okay. And then we have the explanation here regarding the aorist tense. I'll just get rid of this here. Okay. So the first aorist, remember when you do look through those charts and you have the different tenses mentioned, you have the first aorist and then you have a second aorist. So the first aorist is not a different tense from the second aorist. So it relates completely to the form, not the function of the verb. Okay, just the way it looks, but the interpretation or the meaning of whether it's the first aorist or the second aorist or the function of forms is the same. So it's the same tense, the first and second aorist, which will be studied in the next lesson. But the first aorist and second aorist are merely two different ways of forming the same tense of a verb. Thus the English I loved is not a different tense from I threw. But the verb love and the verb throw from the preterite, I'm not sure what preterite means actually, but it's in two different ways. So you say I loved, and then you have threw and throw, but the verb loves. Okay, but yeah, so they're saying it could be expressed with two different, in the Greek, one would be the first aorist and one would be the second. I believe that's what they're saying. The aorist is like the imperfect in that it refers to the past time. Though again, as I mentioned last time, is that the aorist can be used, so it's like imperfect, it can be used for a future prophecy if somebody's explaining the events of the future. But even still, that's, obviously it's prophecy. It's something that somebody saw over a point of time. He saw it and it's encapsulated. I think this is the best explanation, is that the aorist encapsulates a moment in time. So the imperfect refers to continuous action in past time, while the aorist is the simple past tense. Thus the imperfect eluon means I was losing. And remember, losing, I guess. Remember with the imperfect, often it talks about something is happening and then something came along to happen as well. So you say, I was sleeping and then a dog barked and woke me up. So in that case, you'd have the imperfect and then you have the aorist, the dog barked, and I woke up. And that would be, I woke up, I guess that could be an aorist as well. Okay, so I was losing, while the aorist elusa means I loosed. And again, that puts it into just a moment of time. I don't want to get too much into that. It's better to see through examples. So we have this chart on the next slide here. So the Greek tense is illustrated, and so the present tense shows a continuous action or an event. And you could just, as I've given the examples here, like the earth goes around the sun. And here the verb is go, and we put it into the present tense goes. You could put it into what they call the present, I think it's the infinitive, the earth is going around the sun, the present continuous. But if it's just like what we call a habitual action or something that's going on constantly, then we would call it the present simple. So here we have the present tense showing that action is continuous from start to finish. Or it's not even talking about the finish actually. So we say the earth is going around the sun, or something like the sun rises every morning. In this case it'd be like what we call a present iterative. And iterative means it's sort of happening at different points, but like regular points. Okay, so that's a continuous action, but it's only going to happen sort of once in 24 hours, of course. You have the imperfect, while I was walking my dog along the beach. So here we have one action happening, and while that was still undergoing that process, while that process was still in action, something else happened. The sun came up in that case. So this is the imperfect. And then the sun came up. That would, if it was in the Greek, that would be an aorist, because the sun, it came and went, and that action is completed. I think we even have that on the next slide. It talks about the snapshot, like a single frame in a movie. Okay, or just a sort of a snippet, a clip of a movie, like the sun coming up, coming over the horizon. You could take one photo, or just a short frame of 1 or 2 minutes. And that completes that action there. Okay, and then we have the perfect tense. Yesterday the sun rose at 5:47, and you could say that's aorist as well. So in English it just we would put it as a perfect tense because it's completed. In the Greek it's more, it sort of relates to an action that's completed with events that go on. That might not be the best example. Another sort of example, if you're looking at completed action, you'd say I graduated from my studies at university in 2010, for example. So when you say you graduated, that's certainly a perfect tense because it shows that there was an action before that was completed, and you have the past results, you have your education to prove for that, assuming you can remember everything you've said. everything you were taught, sorry. Okay, and then you have the aorist. God created the sun and all the heavenly bodies. Obviously, the action was that's in the past. And again, this could be aorist, or the writer might write it as a perfect. And in the Greek, the writers will have their different styles as well. As I pointed out in a previous lesson, that Mark will often use the imperfect tense when he could be using the aorist. This is what we've seen with Mark a lot. Even as we were starting in on chapter 1 of Mark, you might want to go back and have a look at this. But we do see many times he's using the imperfect when other writers might have used the aorist. And then that brings the scholars into this debate about what was he really talking about. We don't want to overthink things too much. Okay, it might have just been his style. But yeah, when the scholars start arguing about who's right and who's wrong, and we're not scholars, so it's very difficult to follow along, really. But it does make for some interesting studies, I guess, if not confusing. Okay, so here's just a few more principles about the aorist here. The simplest way to think about the aorist tense is this. It describes an action as a whole, complete event. And think of it like a snapshot or a single frame in a movie. It just tells you that this happened without getting into the details of how long it took, or if it was a process, or what the details of that process were. And it's also described as a punctiliar action, like a dot on a timeline. So here we have a dot here, but it's only the one dot. This is the punctiliar here, and instead of like the imperfect tense where, actually I'm not quite sure why they'd say punctiliar. I think punctiliar more relates to the present tense, where you do have something that's happening at certain events, though there are certainly examples of the imperfect tense where something is happening and then it stops. Might be something like, you could say, the kings of Israel were evaluated according to their lives, and that could be the imperfect, but it's happening with every king, so that would be punctiliar. We have the word punctuation. It might help you remember that as a dot, and you have punctuation marks like at the end of a sentence. You have the full stop, so that's like a punctiliar. It happens here, and then it happens again over here and here. So that's punctiliar action, which is part of the aspect. And I've got to mention a bit more about that. I think there was a slide here talking about aspect versus time, right here. Okay, so in English we mostly think about verb tenses in terms of time. So we talk about past, present, or future. But Greek is a bit different. It cares just as much as they care, meaning the emphasis or what it's presenting to us, just as much, if not more, about aspect. Aspect describes how the author views an action. Is it ongoing, or is it a single complete event? Okay. Okay, and then we have the examples here, like with the present imperfect tense is like a video recording. It shows an action in progress as an ongoing process, so I was walking. And then the aorist tense is like a photograph. So I mentioned before with the example, like the sun coming out is a very short action. So you can't really complete that within one photo, but within a short clip. So this is like a photograph. It shows the action as a single whole event viewed from the outside. You can say I walked home yesterday. And so the whole action of walking home is encapsulated or brought together with the aorist. So when you see an aorist verb in the indicative mood, which is the one used for stating facts, it almost always refers to a past event. And as I mentioned, there are exceptions. And I guess it could be, it can still be used with imaginary events or events that weren't true, but were potential events in the past. But its primary job is to present that event as a simple, completed fact without any extra commentary on its duration. So he died is a classic aorist example. The focus is on the event itself, not the process of dying. Okay. Now I'm going to give you the examples of the aorist. Where do we have that? Oh, here it is. Here I skipped over. Okay. So I'll give you the. Actually, I'll do the imperfect first, because we've studied these, and just so you don't get confused, that's why I was doing these last week with you as well. Because some of them, you have what's called the augment on front of the aorist, and the augment is where you have what's called like a lengthening of the stem, and this tells the reader that he's using an aorist rather than another tense. Okay, but with the imperfect active indicative of luo, that's the basic stem we're using for the to show the forms of each word. So we have eluon, elus, eluen. It's the first person, second person, third person, singular. And then you have the first, second, and third person plural, eluomen, eluete, and eluon. Okay, now the endings are different, but you do have the epsilon here, which is going to be quite prevalent in a lot of the aorist tenses. Okay, now if the word actually begins itself with an epsilon, then it's going to be extended to an eta. If a word begins with an alpha, that gets extended to an epsilon. So if you there's like an order of the vowels of how they're extended out. Alpha becomes epsilon, epsilon becomes eta. How do they do the eta? They do something with the eta as well, but there's not many verbs that begin with the eta actually. But yeah, always the alpha to the epsilon, and the epsilon goes to the eta. So that's.
Excuse me, Pastor Ten, is that in page 171?
Sorry, is that what?
Page 171 or?
It's number 171. I can tell you what page it's on. Let me just have a look. It's actually on. Oh, hang on. Let me just check back here. 171. Oh, that's going back quite a way. Back to chapter 171. So this is chapter 14. Okay, skipping over one. It's on page 82 of the book.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Ten.
That's it. Lesson 14. Okay. Okay, yeah, so that's, now into the first aorist indicative, active indicative. Remember, as you go through, you see the list, you have the aorist active indicative, there's going to be the aorist passive indicative, and the aorist middle or deponent indicative. And then you're going to have the aorist active, do they have subjunctives? Let me just check, and I'll tell you which moods they have, because you don't have all the moods with the aorist. And there's a chart here. So with the aorist, you have the active, the middle, the perfect active. Hang on, let me see. Oh, you do. So you have there's a subjunctive aorist, aorist active, subjunctive, imperfect, infinitive, and the particle. Okay, yeah, so you have all the moods with the aorist. Not with the future though, and not with the perfect. Okay, so the aorist follows, if you can remember this, in the present tense and the, what's this one? Not the imperfect, I'm just looking at the chart on page 585. And this is luo, which is the present, middle, passive, and that's the imperfect. So the imperfect doesn't have aorist, and then aorist. Okay, so just remember that with the aorist, it's like the present tense in that you have all of the moods. Remember, the moods are looking at, for example, we have the indicative mood, which says a statement of fact. You have the subjunctive mood, which expresses possibility. You have the imperative mood, that's talking about a command. And what's the other one? Imperative, subjunctive. And then you have the, they call it the hortatory, like a suggestive mood as well. Okay, so you have all of those within the present and in the aorist, but not necessarily the other tenses. Okay, so again, it probably sounds a little bit confusing, but you have to remember that when you look at something like this, aorist, active, indicative, remember you have these three aspects of a verb, aside from the person that it's talking about. So Now, the aorist is the tense, the active is the voice, and you have three voices. You got the active, the passive, and then the middle or deponent voice, and then you got the different moods. As I just gave you, have the indicative, you have the subjunctive, you have the dative, locative, instrumental of means, and then you have the imperative and the vocative as well. And I said the hortatory, which is sort of like a suggestive one as well. It's not very common. Okay, okay, so yeah, with the first aorist, elusa, okay, so that'd be first person singular. So you'd say I loosed, elusas is thou or you, that's second person, eluse or elusen. Remember, this is going to depend on whether the next letter in the sentence begins with a consonant or a vowel. If the next the next word in the sentence begins with a vowel, then they're going to put the nu on the end here. If it begins with a consonant, they're going to drop off the nu and it will finish with the epsilon in this case. Elusamen as we loosed, elusate, ye as plural, you loosed, you guys, and then elusan as they loosed. Okay, so these are the endings you have to remember for the aorist active indicative. Okay, so let's get into the review of just a couple of verses. We're winding back a couple of verses here. I'll just read through these, and you're quite familiar with these now, so we don't have to spend too much time on it. Remember, off the E sword, you have sometimes it's bracketed and it just doubles up. So when we're reading, and for your tests as well, don't read what's in the brackets because it just appears afterwards as well. So kai legon hoti peplerotai ho kairos kai engiken sorry, it should be hey basilia tu theu metanoiete kai pistuete ento euangelio. And there would actually normally be an iota subscript hanging off the bottom of this, but it doesn't appear on the software as well. Okay, so I've done that before and you know all of that, or you should do. Mark 1:16, down here. Kai paragon para tain thalasan, tes Galileas, eden, Simona, kai Andrian, ton adelphon Simonos, amphibalontos en te thalase, esan ga Galileas. Okay, so going along, yeah, I think in this case, paragon would mean sort of going, and then para is alongside, and then the Sea of Galilee. Okay, here we have an example of a second aorist, Adan. The stem is horao. So usually what happens with the second aorist is the word can completely change forms. Again, so from the word horao, you have the word Adan, totally different words. You wouldn't recognize that they're related in any way. We have the word amphibalontis here, which meant to cast a net. You probably won't see it too often, but you know the stories of the guys fishing, that comes up quite a bit. So you'll probably see that word, and then the word alias, fisherman. Okay. And just to bring out, just to review one more time, remember when you have the word gar here, it's the word for, but for actually it occurs after the verb. So here we said, for they were. Now the word they were is wrapped up in the word a son here. Okay, that's what we would call an auxiliary verb, but here they just call it a verb. It's like a helping verb or auxiliary verb. And you would read it, and they were casting the net into the sea, and then you skip over the pronoun for they were, so the word is they were, for they were fishermen, and then it makes sense like that. So if you see the word gar, it sort of means, hey, take a step back here and read the pronoun first, or the verb to be. It's like the verb to be with the pronoun put into that. See, in English we would say I am, you are, they are, for example, but in the Greek the word I am, for example, ego, just becomes the one word. Mark 1:17. Kai epen autois ho Jesus deuter hopizo mu. Kai poieso humas genesthai alias anthropon. There's probably a few words you should be able to recognize there, but and to them, they said Jesus down here, ho Jesus epen. So you're sort of reading backwards a little bit. Literally, it's saying, and he said to them, Jesus. But here is the. He's not saying to them Jesus, but this is Jesus said to them. Here is the subject. This is in the nominative singular masculine here. Ho Jesus, that Jesus. But literally, remember when you're going through sentences and you're trying to pick out the meaning, you need to find the subject. So it's really important to find the subject first, because in English that's how we usually present our sentences. The subject, then the verb, then the object. Now, so here you have the preposition kai, and then after that, once you read through it once and there's the subject, is Jesus. So and Jesus, and then go back to the verb. And Jesus said, twice to them, and then he said, follow after me. I think that's how the word deuter, hopizo, is like follow after me. And from the word poio, which means I will, but here is the future. I will make you what to become fishermen of men. That's literally what it says, fishermen of men. Okay, so I think that was, we'd sort of done those verses, but that was like the review. And we'll continue on with Mark 1:17 in a little bit more detail. Okay, so kai epen, again we have the same as what we just had in the first, what was it, Mark 1:15. Kai lego ohoti, hang on, we're doing this verse again. Oh, sorry, no, we've done that. Okay, Mark 1:18. Okay, kai euthus aphentes. It's from the word aphiemi. We have the root word aphiemi, which means to forgive. In this case, they left off. But kai euthus, you see this word a lot too, immediately. Yep. Somebody was healed maybe, and then they immediately followed Jesus, or they immediately went to the temple. And euthus, here's an adverb. See, it's describing time. This is what adverbs do. Often, adverbs can describe places or whatever, but in terms of time, immediately, slowly, quickly, hesitantly, things like this. Usually when you have in English and you have the word ly on the end, that's a good sign that that's an adverb. And adverbs describe the verbs, just like adjectives describe nouns. Okay, so kai euthus aphentes ta dictua he koluthesan auto. And immediately they left, and then ta dictua is nets. It doesn't actually have the word their nets, and followed him. Okay, so that's there. It doesn't say their net. It just says they left the nets and they followed him. And so the word akaluso works together with here we have the pronoun and the dative mood. Remember, dative shows direction. So the focus of their following is directed towards him. So they followed him. And here you have an aorist, active indicative. Okay, so it's showing that they followed him, and we translate that in English in the present, in the past simple tense. They followed him. Okay, moving on, Mark 1:19. Kai probas oligon eiden Jacobon ton tu Sebediou. Kai Simonein ton adelphon altu. Kai altus ento ploio katarisontas ta dictua. So and, they don't translate it, but sometimes the word and doesn't really need to, or the kai doesn't need to be translated. But you say like from then or from then on. But here, in the English, it just sort of flows through. So I guess that's why the translators didn't bother to translate the word kai. But just going on, probas, and then holigon is just a little bit. So going on a bit further, Aden, again, this is from the word horao, he saw. And the pronoun is attached with the verb, so we translate it, he saw, meaning Jesus saw Jacob and his, okay, sorry, when I say Jacob, the son of Zebedee and his brother, and James his brother. John, sorry, and John his brother. And Altus and to employ, and they who were also, okay, you should have L2. Yeah, they're not translating Altus there. Okay, that's the pronoun. Literally saying, and they were in the boat mending the nets. Maybe they translate as also. Oh, okay, here they're translating kai, I believe, as also. They were also mending. Okay, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, who also had Delphine L2. Okay, yeah, but that's, so it's James and his brother. Yeah, okay, again, so yeah, kai in this case also, and were also, they were also in the boat, mending their nets, and in this case, plural neuter, so dictuas, nets is plural, and then you have the article in the plural here too. Okay, so for your homework, when you've finished all this and you'll close down, I will send the video this time. I'm quite confident it's going to be saved this time, and then you can follow through this, or just read through by yourself. Again, we've chosen Mark chapter 1 because it's fairly simple Greek. Mark 1:20, kai uthus. Here we have uthus again, this word immediately. It's a good example, actually. We see that, like a good businessman, a good minister, anybody that's successful in life, they have an idea to do something, and assuming all the factors and everything's right, then they'll immediately do it. Jesus isn't going to procrastinate and walk off and say, well, I need to sleep now and I'll come back tomorrow and call these guys. So he's doing it straight away. And this is one of these, this word that we see a lot, euthus. Things are happening immediately because people have a very positive response to what's going on. So, okay, so kai euthus, ekalesen, altus, kai afentes ton patera auton, Zebedean en to ploio, meta ton, what's this, misthonton, apelthon, hopidzo autu. Okay, so immediately he called them, from the word kaleo. Here we have the word kaleo, the stem is in here, with the beginning of the kappa, but with the aorist, remember you have the augment, so there's the epsilon there. So ekalesen, that's the third person, singular. He called them, autus, that's in the what do we call it? Accusative plural masculine. Remember, the accusative is the object. So he's calling, he's the subject, he's calling to them as the object. And then what's the action on their behalf? They left. They left. It's interesting, it doesn't say they immediately left. So he immediately called them. Did they immediately leave? We don't know. We sort of assume they did. But maybe they said, oh, we're going to have to sit down and talk about this with our father first. But the assumption is that they immediately left as well. Or more or less, they've got to take time to gather their, some of their things together and pack them up and say goodbye to their father and the other servants, for example. But so we see here that they left the father. So that's the aorist tense, like the past tense. They left the father, their father, Zebedee, in the boat. So he didn't even get out of the boat. They sort of said their farewells in the boat, and then they jumped out of the boat, and then they hopped ashore. Well, they left the father with the hired servants, apelthon pisa alto. Okay, now, yeah, that's right. So you have the word misthorton, that must be the servants. So you have now I'm not very familiar with this word. It obviously doesn't appear very often in the Greek, but I can recognize that this is going to be the word servants here because it's preceded by the pronoun, of course, and that's plural. So it can only be talking about the hired servants, and then went away to follow. So to follow after apelthon. The word althon, you have here beginning with the eta here. Althon means to come or to go, and so with the prefix apo, and often the prefixes are shortened down. So apo would usually be alpha, pi, and omicron. They obviously cut off the omicron there, and they put it together with the word althen. In this case, second aorist becomes althon. So apelthon would mean to went, to go away, or to part from. So the word apo as a prefix means to go away from. So they went from their father to follow him, to follow Jesus. Okay, I'll just read through that again one more time because we're sort of putting the jigsaw together, and then we can see the overall picture. We'll sit back and we'll read through it again. So in Mark 1:20, kai euthus ekalesen autus, kai aphentes ton patera auton zebedion en to ploio, metaton misthonton apelthon opizo autu. Okay, now as you get more familiar with the Greek, and I'm not really doing this, I'd need to read through it a few times to get what's called the cadence. And cadence is the way that you phrase your talking. We're not going to focus too much on that, but it might help with your understanding. Like we see it, we have the phrasing in the English. Immediately he called them, and they left the father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants. That becomes another phrase. Now we have that in music. You have phrases in music where the person writing the music, he will in the language of music, he's explaining one thing through a phrase, especially in classical music where there's no words. And then something you might have a reply or something like that. But in English, essentially we see language being broken into phrases, and we call cadence as like the rhythm of speaking. And again, it's not something that we really need to focus on, but as you're reading yourself, it might help to try to see how the sentences are phrased, and it might just help your understanding a little bit more. Okay, then we've got two more verses to go here, so I'll just come back to Mark 1:21. Kai es poruontai. This is from the word poruomai. Poruomai is another, what's the other word? Like althen I just mentioned as an aorist, and erkomai. These are verbs which mean to come or to go. And it's interesting, they use the same verb often for come or to go, so you have to look at the context. Are they saying, are you coming or are you going? But here we have the word from poruomai, and they put ace at the beginning as a prefix, which usually means to go into. So here they translate it, and going went into Capernaum, because I guess this is a present. What's that? Deponent, indicative. Okay, so deponent means. Remember deponents, but use it with the middle voice, but it's taking it from I think they call it from an active point of view. And the middle voice, remember the active voice is that the subject is doing the action, but usually it's upon somebody else. So I picked up the book. I am the creator of the action. So that's active voice. Or if you said the book was picked up by me, this is passive. See, the book is sort of written as the subject, the main character, and we're explaining what's happening to the book. He's being picked up, or it's being picked up. But in the middle or deponent, the person that's doing the action is also participating in the results. So when you're walking a place, you're actively doing the walking, but you're actively or you're passively receiving the results of your walking, which is you're moving along a place. So this is one of the things we see a middle voice being used. Often I think it was sleeping as well. I slept in the afternoon. That would be more like a middle thing. You're doing the action, but you're also receiving the benefits of that. Okay, but here we have the word eis poruontai, eis katharanum. Kapharanum. That's how they get Capernaum from that. Kai euthus. Oh, here he is already. I think we've had him in 3 out of the last 4 verses immediately. Tois sabasin, eiselthon, eis tain sunagaugain, ididasken. Okay, so they, so because it's present, they were entering. You can almost say that they were entering into Capernaum. And it's interesting, you have the word into with the prefix here, the word eis, and then you have eis again. Okay, but anyway, so they entered into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath, and here we have the dative case being used for on the Sabbath, or in the Sabbath, during the Sabbath, and the word tois, and the Sabbath, the word sabasin here with the dative, I guess you could say in or during the Sabbath time. Eiselthon, and here we have eis again, and from the word elthon, that's a different form of the word elthin or erkamai. They entered into eis tain synagogain, into the synagogue, and then we have now this is the imperfect. So Mark's gone for the imperfect, active indicative here, began to teach. So because now then they're going to have the dialogue about what's happening afterwards, rather than saying he taught and it's finished as an aorist, he's emphasizing the fact that he was beginning to teach at that point. Okay, no, so this is an example here. So, Excelthon, they were amazed at teaching. Okay, and during that time, it's indicative as well. So, while he was teaching, see, they're using the imperfect here. So, he began to teach, and while he was teaching, it's not completed yet, they were amazed. If it was me, I would probably translate this as they were being amazed at his teaching, I guess, because again we have the imperfect here. So the Mark is looking at this thing from, and remember Peter is probably the person that's relating the events here, and he's relating in a way that's sort of more dramatic. He's saying that they were amazed at his teaching while he was teaching. They were being amazed. Epi te didaxe. Didac K, this would be K actually. K, that's the key there. So didache autu, his teaching. Ein gad didaskon autus os exousian, that's the word for authority. Ekon, and then having. So he is having authority. And here's a verb. This is a what do we call this? A participle. So verb, present, active, participle, nominative, singular, masculine. Kai uk, meaning not, that's a particle, like no or not. Hos, hoi, grammates. Okay, so they were amazed at his teaching, didaske, at his teaching, because, sometimes you might want to translate it because, for his teaching them, okay, or because that. To smooth it out in English, we might say the way that he taught. Okay, the way he was teaching to them was as, and the word horse is like as one having authority, and not as, or not like the scribes, not like the scribes would teach. You hear this sometimes as well. You might wander into a church, you're invited to go somewhere, and you hear somebody that they're teaching, but they're not teaching doctrine. And really, they're all over the place, and they don't really have any solid information. But Jesus obviously, when he's teaching, he's very confident. He knows the truth. He he doesn't compromise, and he teaches doctrine. So this can be amazing for people that have never heard truth taught before and they're hearing it for the first time. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our lesson today. Okay, it's about an hour there. Do you have any questions about any of those, any of those verses or any of the grammar at all? Is everybody still here?
In verse 21, Pastor Tim,
Okay.
there is a word there, ididaskin.
Yes.
Why it is imperfect?
Because from Peter or Mark's point of view, it's saying he began to teach. So it's showing that he was teaching, but the action wasn't finished yet. And then he's going to describe that while, you might sort of say like while he was teaching, the people were amazed as you come into the next verse. Remember that there's no verse markings in there and when he was first writing down. So really he's like sort of, you need to look at it as he was continuing on the writing from one sentence, or it's the same sentence. Probably makes it look more fluid, more smooth. So, he began to teach, or then you could say while he was teaching, the people were being amazed. Maybe that's a better way to do it. We need to look at things, not that there's a full stop at the end of each verse. So it's often easy to sort of, and I'm breaking it here as well onto different slides on the PPT presentation. But if you look through it all, and even in the Greek they didn't have punctuation, but there's not necessarily a full stop here. I think that could be what looks a little bit confusing. So it'd be interesting to know exactly. I think maybe they just wanted to continue on, but with the imperfect, the action is not complete. It's not perfect. It's not over yet. And then you go on. So, and even the word "and," in English we wouldn't use "and" at the beginning of a sentence usually. He began teaching them, and they were amazed at his teaching, something like that, to continue on, or being amazed.
Ito.
Okay. Any other questions?
See, in some translation, I do not know if you have that in King James translation in English.
To have what's the translation?
In English translation, entered into the synagogue and taught. Not teach.
Yeah. See, what they're doing there is that they're sort of recognizing it more like an aorist tense, which again, this is why scholars might argue, why is Mark using the imperfect so many times when he could be using the aorist? And really from the point of view of English, he entered into the temple because obviously entered into the synagogue and he was teaching. But usually with the imperfect, again, if you're going to translate the imperfect as an imperfect, then you would have to say he began, because he hadn't finished. Or you could say, and he was teaching. I think in that case would be okay. But to put it as he taught, that makes it more like the past tense, which is closer to the aorist.
That's right.
So that Bible translation, they'd say, obviously that's what happened. It is a past tense. What does your English translation say again?
And they went into Capernaum and straightway on the Sabbath day, and he entered into the synagogue and taught.
See, that for me, that doesn't bring out the imperfect at all. That's probably not a grammatically correct translation. Again, because they're not bringing out the emphasis of the imperfect.
Mm.
But I don't think it probably doesn't change the interpretation too much. But I just need to be aware that, you know, while he was teaching, the people were being amazed at his teaching. So there's that sort of emphasis. If you say he taught and then you say and the people were amazed, it might mean that they were amazed after, when they were thinking about, you know, that they'd already left the synagogue, they'd gone home, and now they're amazed and they're maybe talking about it among themselves. See, there's that could creep into a different interpretation. Whereas with the imperfect, while he's teaching, the people that are sitting there and amazed, maybe they're saying, wow, this is great. That's encouraging Jesus Christ to keep, you know, to keep talking. And maybe it means that they spend many hours listening to Jesus and even saying, you know, oh, don't go back here. We you know, they had positive volition. We want to keep listening. So, you know, there's those sort of aspects that come into it. And see, I use the word aspect as to, you know, how that should be interpreted.
Is it because of maybe the interpretation of some of the Greek what do you call that? Greek teacher? Maybe because of the word there is epsilon in the first letter of Edidaskin. Is it because of that it was translated as taught, or this is a wrong interpretation? Or
No. By writing the word down as Edidaskan, that makes it as the imperfect.
Imperfect.
Yeah, so if we go back to our forms up above here, you'll see that, where were we with the imperfect? Edidaskan, they were, see, it should be, that's the imperfect active. For he was teaching. So here you have the there's the epsilon, and then you have it finishes off with the epsilon and then the noon head. But yeah, that's definitely the, which verse are we in? That's the imperfect. Edidaskan. See, he, the third person singular, and the imperfect. We see the form, that's the augment on the imperfect, and then finish off the epsilon, and then because there's no other words following, then we have the nu to finish off that word. Okay. Now let me close off the video here. We can finish this off, and if there's any other questions, maybe we could put them after.